Hi everyone, as Graham said, I conduct social science research on the communication of warnings across a variety of natural hazards. So, something that a lot of people who warn the public say to me is, I wrote a perfectly clear warning, why did people not respond? And the answer is there are many, many different reasons why people don't respond to a warning or respond in different ways. And that's been summarised by the global literature, and there are a number of theoretical models that we can draw on to explain these sort of things. For example, the Lindell and Perry model, it's called the Protective Action Decision model. So we know that receiver characteristics influence their response to a warning, such as their age, gender, primary language, their economic and social resources. So for example, we know that women are more likely to respond to a warning. Environmental cues also influence their response, such as feeling the ground shaking, seeing storm clouds gathering, or seeing the waterline recede before a tsunami. Social cues also influence their response. So for example, seeing your neighbours evacuate or your friends and family prepare for a future disaster. The warning messages themselves can also create that influence, so particularly the content and format, which I'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. People's channel access and preference is also an influence. So whether or not they're big users of social media and they have a smartphone in their pocket, or if they're more reliant on the newspapers, TV and radio. And then the frequency and detail that those information sources deliver the information is also an influence. That information that arrives then goes through a filter from that receiver in terms of how much exposure they've had to that warning message, the attention that they pay to it, and how well they understand what it said. And then they can apply their own risk perceptions to that warning. So the level of threat that they think that hazard is posing to them, which is further influenced by things like experience and their location. Then their perceptions on the protective action come into play. So things like how effective they think the guidance message is to actually saving them and those sort of things. And then the stakeholder perceptions as well. So you can see there are a lot of different things that go on in their minds, and everybody's different and every situation's different. So based on all of that information, that person decides whether or not to respond and how to respond. And that response might be to seek further information, which means repeating the whole process again. So it can take place over a very, very short amount of time if the threat perception is particularly high and the message is very clear, but it can also take place over quite a long period of time. As an example of some recent research I've been involved in, I conducted a global literature review to advise the Ministry of Civil Defence Emergency Management here on how best to construct a short warning message. So this was particularly for the emergency mobile alerts on cell broadcast here in New Zealand. And it's for messages up to about 900 characters, but it can also be applied to social media and other short warnings. I had a steering group from civil defence sector to help me guide this research to make sure it was appropriate for that format. And so based on that and testing it using a hypothetical tsunami scenario in the Wellington region, and so that involved 28 people doing clipboard surveys around the Wellington region to see how they would intend to respond to a short message for tsunami warnings. I found that the message needs to be useful, so the content needs to include the source of the information, information about the hazard and impacts, specific guidance information and location information about who's going to be affected, the time that they need to respond to the warning by, and the time that the warning was issued. And it's in that particular order for messages between 500 and 1400 characters. It should include a link to further information to cut down the milling time, it's called, before people then act. And if it's an update, it should say that it's an update. The message should be specific, so as previous speakers have mentioned, make it as personalised as possible and include city names or even less, more discreet if you can, so that they really know that it's going to affect them. The message should be clear and simple with no acronyms, particularly for agencies like to put their acronyms in, but unless you have clear evidence showing that everybody knows what that means, try and avoid it. The action that you're putting in your message needs to be effective. So people need to think that they can achieve that action. It should be affordable and effective in reducing the risk. And of course, it should be triple checked for accuracy so that trust isn't jeopardised. And I've got my report at the bottom there that you can get for free on the GNS website if you want any further information on that. Thank you.